So we're going to talk about the RDL, which is a hamstring dominant movement. This one, the form can get really tricky, and I'm sure you've seen on social media, people do it all kinds of different ways. So before we get any weight technique, where you should feel it and what's happening, PVC pipe, if you're at home, broom, an invisible weight. So it's going to go right against your thighs at the front of your body. So your arms are just kind of resting at your side. Your shoulder blades squeeze back and down. So we're engaging these lat muscles to help your core do its thing. You don't have to think about pulling your core in. If your shoulders are set, your core is going to do the work it needs to do. So once your shoulders are set, you're fused from your neck to your hips. You can't bend, just keep it fused. So at this point, you can bend your knees slightly. We keep loose knees. They're not all the way up here and just not locked out. Your knees are going to stay in the same position, but you're going to stick your hips back. Just kind of like if you have a door behind you and you're just kind of bumping it closed. Hips back. Now this is different from arching your back. Remember, we're fused from your hips all the way up. You're just kind of sticking your hips back. Now I'm not focusing on leaning forward, but as I move my hips back, I'm naturally leaning forward because we're fused. So if you think of this movement more as we're not thinking of it as an up and down movement, we're thinking of it as a forward and backward movement. So you're just sticking your hips backward, and so the weight's just naturally going to come onto your heels a little bit more, not all the way, but a little more on your heels. And as to do that, you can see the bars just sliding down. Then you're going to come back up. Another thing to think of, especially as you add more weight on this, is knees loose, hips back. When you're coming up, I don't want you to think about lifting the bar. Think about feet into the ground so hard that you come up, and that's going to feel a lot more in your glutes and in your hamstrings. So we'll do that again. Shoulders, knees loose, hips back, and your hips are going to keep going back until your hamstrings stop you. So if you have a lot of mobility, you're going to go a lot farther. Mine stopped me about here. You should feel a nice stretch. Push through the ground, come up. Now, what we don't want happening, you're probably going to need to come by my knees a little more, but is we don't want your knees, as your hips coming back, for your knees to come forward. That's where you're going to turn it into a little bit more of a squat. So if your knees come and hit the bar, you're probably doing more of a squat than a deadlift. So knees slightly bent, hips back. And another cue we can use is as your hips come back, your shins also move back just a little bit, and that'll help prevent your knees from coming forward. And then the other mistake with this one is that when you get to here, you keep going and you start bending your spine. And again, that's more back, not your hamstrings. So we keep your shoulders set, and once your hamstrings stop you, you're not going to keep traveling down. Hamstrings stop you, then that's your end point right there. So for some people, their end point is going to be all the way up here. For other people, it's going to be all the way down. And that's going to be dependent on your body structure. And push back up.